pleased to welcome now on stage Srinivas Poosarla from Infosys. He's Senior Vice President and Chief Privacy Officer at Infosys based in Bangalore and responsible for ensuring Infosys compliance to data protection regulations in over 30 countries, including various EU countries. So the stage is yours. You have 19 minutes. The clock is here. And yeah.
Thank you. Just want to check, am I audible? Good, thank you. Thank you for Bitcom for inviting me for this. I'm actually going to speak based on my experiences working in this field on data privacy for about 15 years now plus at Infosys, and also being associated with the SC27 committee of ISO, where we develop standards on privacy. So this is not something that I'm speaking about the company or what we do inside the company. It's more of my personal experiences. Just want to set that context rightly. So when we start discussing about AI, the first question that comes up in our mind is, should we regulate AI? And that's important to take one step back and see, take some example. And the best example I could think about is the upper picture is printing press, and the lower one obviously is camera. I would say digital camera. What is the law that came when these two devices got invented, or machines got invented? Excellent, copyright law. So if you see, the copyright law would not have been required at all if we didn't have printing press or cameras, which could, at very little cost, disseminate information today in a fraction of a second across the world. But did we regulate digital cameras or did we regulate printing press? No, we regulated one of the important aspects of these devices, which is about the ability to copy information which could harm the copyright, the inventor or the owner of the assets. So when we regulate AI or any aspect, new technology, it's important for us to keep in view. We should regulate in a manner where we don't create hindrances for innovation, but at the same time, make sure that the stakeholders, the beneficiaries, do not get adversely impacted, for which it is important to make regulations on the deployment use cases. So when it comes to AI or any technology, the focus should be on not AI itself, but the harm it could cause depending on the use cases that we deploy on, and then see that those aspects are balanced in terms of how much innovation you could embrace vis-a-vis the harms to humans, the privacy harms, the safety harms, ethical harms, etc., which we'll talk about. So that's important to set the context. So when we talk of these harms, predominantly, and I'm talking about those use cases of AI which are related to personal information processing. There are a good number of use cases which do not touch people. It's about autonomous cars. It's about improving our lives, which are in manufacturing use cases, which do not so much have to do with privacy. But our focus is on privacy, and which is the thrust today. And we see that when we talk of privacy, it's about data empowerment. So today, almost everything that we do in our day-to-day life is leaving digital footprints, whether it is at workplace, it is at home, you do shopping, you travel, entertainment, and those digital footprints at very little cost can be gleaned across through the internet and cyberspace through big data and technological means, and could potentially benefit us or harm us. It depends on the use case, and all said and done, there is a disproportionate asymmetry between we as consumers or citizens and someone on the other side who has huge potential to glean this data and do whatever they need to. Of course, that's why we need regulations to balance this aspect. And typically, when you talk of privacy and data empowerment, it's about being informed about what's going on. Sometimes it's also choice, but not always. There are many use cases where choice is impossible to do. It's about decisional autonomy, which is about I decide how my data should be used, or when I expose myself to being under scrutiny by the public, etc. So that autonomy is not just about changes that directly affect me, but also the recommendations that are made to me. For instance, so-called filter bubble that we see in the internet when we keep seeing same stuff coming up again and again based on our interests, which is good many times but harmful at times. And when is that switching between good and harm depends on me, and I should have the ability to switch these contexts based on which environment I'm in, and that the regulators need to put burden on the companies to see that they respect these contexts for the privacy and let the user switch these states. The data minimization, very important. It is about ability to have least amount of information about me, if possible anonymous, if not the least amount of information. Because more data causes harm, more harm. But we'll see it's completely counterintuitive, because for us, in the AI world, more the data, better it is. So how do we balance that? Unlinkability, very important attribute in privacy, which is that databases should be kept separately and disparate, because it doesn't give the ability to clean information together. Now, this is again a challenge in many areas, as we'll see. Reliability or quality is about ensuring accuracy of data, reproducibility of data. Data protection is security, and rights are, we know, GDPR rights and rights to question, right to access data, etc. All these basic principles for a digital native are translated into AI principles, pretty much mapped, not one-to-one exactly. Few areas, of course, are more than GDPR and privacy, which will not touch upon. And the entity types that it gets impacted is AI provider, the people who manufacture the AI model, user organization, which is an organization which uses the AI model, and the boundaries between the two are nebulous, because many times there's a great collaboration between the two. And the accountability becomes weak. And there is the third, the two are defined, but the third one, AI system integrator, are companies which help implement AI by a third-party vendor. They buy a model and implement. What are the responsibilities on them? So these are all evolving, and we need to wait and watch how it will go. But we have to address these concerns. And as you see from the Venn diagram below, there's a good overlap between GDPR and EU AI Act, and why similarly in other countries, when you make AI law and privacy law, there's a very good overlap. And we should see that the overlap should not burden the industry and in order to fulfill the requirements of both the laws, and there has to be a lot of harmony between the two. If you see that we just talk about this design of ML-based AI, because I'm covering ML-based, because non-ML-based is not so much of concern for us now. And most of you are attending the conference. Most of you must be familiar with AI, so we don't spend more than half a minute on this. Just everything that we talk about in the world of AI is through simple Bayes theorem. There are other theorems, of course, but it's about the conditional probability of the fact that the knowledge gets updated every time we get new knowledge. And that knowledge has a probability, because the decision that I'm going to take or the inference that I'm going to make is based on what I learned. But if I see something today which has to change my opinion, tomorrow I'll take a different decision. Now, these knowledge that we get is translated into what we call weightages. There are attributes, there are weightages, and the weightages that are assigned will determine what influence it will be on the final outcome. A similar thing happens to us when we talk to someone who seems to be not reliable. We reduce the weightage for that person, because we know that this was misinformation. So similarly, the AI has to adjust itself for the weightages and therefore draw inferences which are accurate. Now, what is accuracy is also a big question, because accuracy has two dimensions: relative, absolute. If there's some facial recognition software has to recognize me to allow me entry into a building or a premises, it has to accurately identify me. If it rejects me, although I'm a genuine user, there's a problem there. But if somebody has to get a job or get a credit card, and they are denied a job or a credit card, what is accuracy is little debatable, because many times humans are not able to answer why the particular person was rejected on a particular job. accurately, not always, because there are multiple factors which play into the decision making. Depending on that, and the weightages that we assign to various things like education, qualifications, experience, soft skills, etc. And humans, when humans are not able to precisely answer, it is difficult for us to expect machines to precisely answer. So this aspect has to be kept in mind that in when we talk of explainability. So the entire process is about induction, learning, and deduction, which is about application of the decision making, and the three areas: supervised, unsupervised, reinforcement learning. We know how it happens. And we quickly get into the concerns, and then the main slide where I want to spend a little time on how do we address the risks. So pretty much broadly you can divide into two categories: pre-learning and post-learning, which is deployment. Pre-learning, the issues that we face is that the learning can happen from data scraped from internet, or it could be from known domain of users whom we know and where we have better control to inform them, etc. But mostly the learning happens through public data. Then you don't have any control who these people are, and is the data de-identified. So obviously these concerns are there, that are we processing data with a legal basis, which is Article 6 of GDPR, because it requires one of the legal basis to be there, one of which is consent. It could be legitimate interest, but it depends on the context. And did you inform them? Information is mandatory. Choice is not. Article 12, 13, 14 require you to inform them. There is no rights to delete objective processing because you can't even reach them. You probably don't know who they are. If the data is completely de-identified or what we call anonymous, then the burden reduces because GDPR doesn't apply, and therefore you can be need not worry about this aspect of identifying them and giving them rights, except that the condition of the new situation comes when you see that if identification is possible through photographs, for instance, the Clearview breach, for example, which came up in the news some time ago, and it's a difficult situation where if you can collect photographs, the internet, and be able to identify any individual, that brings us to the fundamental question that is data which is put in the internet by me publicly, is it free to use? So far, we were of the assumption that it's free to use. But that use, maybe tomorrow we need to think in a different way. That use, maybe it's only for you to see the data, as much as when you buy a book from a shop, you're expected to read it, not photocopy it, not reprint it or sell it. That's the implicit understanding. Maybe tomorrow the regulations will evolve to say that you probably cannot use data for processing which can disproportionately cause harm to you in terms of able to identify you where you are, for instance, and in various photographs in the public domain, etc. So these are new SKs, and I think we have to constantly the law always will be two steps behind technology, and that's fine. But our job as AI producers and users is to be responsible to decipher and predict those harms and prevent them rather than waiting for regulators to come and question us. I think that's the approach we should take. Moving on the right side is when you deploy, this is a user entity. The users have the consumers have the question that, hey, it's a black box. I don't know what's happening inside. Just because there is no human involved, people feel uncomfortable, which is very obvious. Particularly in the initial stages, this is reasonable for people to have doubts on: is the AI reliable? Is it having the human factor? Is it empathetic? Is the decision making transparent? Is it logical with reasoning, etc.? And therefore, I think we don't have to worry about these apprehensions, but we'll see how we can address them. They are unaware that the fact that AI is used, outcome could be inaccurate, it could be biased, unfair, automated decision making could happen, which is we know. So this is the main aspects I would want to cover. Explainability, one of the areas which is very important, talked about, and one of the most difficult to bring out is how do you explain that the decision outcome of my particular the decision about me. And now this can be global or local. Global level, it's relatively easy, where you can say a model is predictable, it has regression coefficients, Of course, if it's too many variables and dimensionality problem arise, then it is a little difficult, but more or less it's fine. But if you get to the local level, it's more difficult, and we have technologies such as LIME, which are local interpretable model agnostic explanations, which give you some degree of estimation of why a particular decision was taken, and they give which factors, which attributes played the role in a particular decision, and what was the value threshold due to which you were denied a credit card or selected, or you found to be this medicine has to be given to you, whatever is the outcome that has come. But these all have to evolve. We are at very early stage. And then the other issue that comes is that, first of all, do we get into this aspect of explainability? Can we replace explainability at least partly by accountability? So this is a thinking. I want to leave thoughts on this, that it is important not to make systems which where every moment we have interaction with users. We have to build a trust by which the model becomes reliable, by seeing that the explainability is given. Yes, explainability is important, but to whom? I don't want to give this to the user, end user. I, in the company, in the model developer, I should be able to have complete transparency on how it is working, which we call intervenability in the 3 metrics of privacy. Intervenability is about understanding how the system works. It should not be black box. But do I have to give this to users? No. Very often no, because users won't be able to understand. There'll be IP issues, proprietary issues. Take example of an aircraft. Today when we fly, do we ask do we ask the airliner to say that how is the weather condition? Are we safe when you're flying this route? We don't. Let's assume that the flight is traveling to a high altitude terrain. The conditions are very adverse there. The pilot, one of the pilot is not aware. He or she is first time flyer to a high altitude terrain. But we put one more pilot who's experienced. So this other pilot is now learning. So our role similarly is we don't explain. We rely on airliner to ensure that safety is taken care of. Now airliner has to understand. Airliner cannot say that, oh, I don't know how things are going to work. We leave it to chance. Similarly, in the AI, we need to be able to ensure that the learning happens. The pilot equivalent here is learning. It has broad, diverse spectrum where all groups, all conditions are simulated. Where there is a lack of simulation, we generate synthetic data to train those areas. Sometimes you may not get wide domain to train the machine learning scripts, but you then choose artificially generated data to train it. But those are aspects we need to think, because too much of transparency, knowledge, explainability will put burden on organizations. Transparency, relatively easy, we should do that. But what do we do about publicly available data as a concern? Accuracy and reliability, human bias, GIGO, whatever data comes in, that's what goes out. So when people are themselves not clear, what do you expect AI to do? But minimization is a very important attribute we should use. Now, data minimization is contrary, as I said, more the data we get, better insights we get in big data. And we can make better inferences, whether it is delivery of ads or delivery of diagnostic of a disease, right? But data minimization can be harmful. Now it will depend, the situation depends on the data that we're talking about to minimize. Is it playing a role or is it unnecessary? Now that you need to determine manually. There's an experiment conducted some time ago where it's generally believed that men are better at orchestra than women. It was a belief. So they did an experiment and put a curtain and had the jury to test who is good. And the result was that there are almost 50% men and women. That curtain removed the biases people had, the jury had. So that curtain is equivalent to data minimization. So many times the data which is not playing a role in deciding the result comes into the picture, which causes biases. Same thing happens in job applications, in credit card monitoring, in fake fraud detection, etc. So it's very important role minimization plays. Control bias by measures like F1 score. First measure this bias. Bias is between two groups of data. Is it statistically significant? Accuracy, that's you have to measure. There are metrics available. Human in loop, nice to have, very good. We should have that. But it will kill AI if you have too much of human in loop, because the very purpose of human AI is defied if you have bring human in loop for every decision. So there has to be balance, and only critical decisions we should do it. Synthetic data we spoke about. Use of causation in high impact applications. The problem of correlation and causation is well known. The correlation is what machine learnings do. They don't do causation. But there are many times the relationship between y and x is not y equal to fx equal to y equal to fx1 and x1 equal to gx2. So the relationship is some other variable, hidden variable. So it's important to find out that variable, particularly in medical diagnostics, it can be fatal consequences if you just rely on correlation. So causation has to be established, but most low-risk applications do not involve causation, and they're good to go. So we should be careful where to bring causation, otherwise it will kill AI. Secure architecture, because data poisoning attack can happen. Data poisoning would make model behave in a different way, which you don't want. Fairness is a profound subject, very subjective. But one fairness is to do with bias avoidance, which we spoke about. The other fairness is which use cases we could use for AI. Can we understand desperation of a consumer to figure out how much to charge for a taxi cab or for an airfare? Now AI will help you to do that. So these are ethical questions which need to be addressed. Should we leave it on organizations, or should regulators, sectoral laws define? We'll have to see how the laws evolve. But there are AI gives us the opportunity to understand people better, and that understanding would also mean that it could be exploitative use cases. So the use cases which can exploit people may have to be carefully balanced and seen that it is informed, where there's a choice, it's possible, but some of them could be against consumer interest. But there are different forums to address that. Security, model inversion attack, it could reveal data. We know what happens when you can read the data. Normally, data is not memorized. The way data is stored in AI, it's not as it is the raw data. But sometimes when the group representation is very small, it could memorize and reproduce. So it's very important to safeguard against that. Accountability, we have to have contractual arrangements. There's also question of erga omnes property right. If you apply property rights theory doctrine, then do users of the AI responsible for what the producer did it? Difficult to answer that question.
One more sentence, please. We really need to continue. One more sentence.
Sure. So these are regulations. I think I don't need to spend time. You all are aware. EU Act, we know. New York AI bias law is very strong, which came automated employment decisions. It requires third-party audit and notice. Singapore is one of the forerunners on AI law, but they didn't come out with a law, but they did offer AI verified tool which you could use. So the regulations all over the world are shaping up, and we are a long way to go. But few countries have come up with the guidances. And this is a slide which shows AI principles across countries. Many have adopted these principles, except human oversight. And the last slide I want to conclude is we require greater industry participation, standards to able to measure these metrics we spoke about, because to avoid inconsistency, minimize burden on compliance due to overlap between privacy and AI law. Otherwise, we all will be burdened. So are regulators going to be burdened. We should talk about sandboxing. I think
we need to come to an end.
Sure. Accountability as opposed to excessive transparency. I spoke about that. Institute self-certification mechanisms to reduce burden on regulators and developers. Thank you.
Thank you very much.